All right. Believe we are live now. Maybe I'll wait a few minutes for people to join. How are y'all doing today? I'm in a pretty relaxed mood today. Give y'all like a few minutes. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to my Q&A live show. And the reason I'm doing this is because I recently just hit 900 subscribers on my channel. And oh, we've got someone here. Carl. What's up, Carl? My sound is repeating a second after you speak. Uh-oh. Well, I don't know how to fix that. Hopefully that stops. Let me know if it keeps doing it, and then if it keeps doing that, I will try my best to figure it out. If not, I'm not very tech savvy, so that probably won't go well. But anyway, like I said, this is a celebration of me hitting 900 subscribers, and I will be doing a Q&A. I did a 900 subscribers video, and I told y'all to leave a bunch of questions down for me to answer for a live show, and that's essentially what I'm going to be doing. And it's odd, I've never heard anything like it before, so I'm original. Hey Chaz, how's it going? Yeah, so that's basically what I'm going to be doing here, is just reading some questions off and answering them here. And if any of you guys watching right now have any questions, I will be sure to try to answer them. Let me go get the questions here off my phone. All right. Good so far, editing. Yeah, I have to do a lot of editing because I'm traveling to Canada next week, and I don't really want to be doing a bunch of booktube stuff while I'm with Stacy. So I'm trying to like pre-film a bunch of stuff and have it edited so that when I'm in Canada, I can just upload it and not have to worry about it. So that's a lot of what I've been doing this week. Yeah, I know the struggle. Okay, so the first question is from Esme Rosalind. Are there any songs that you associate with certain books or maybe with your favorite book? Yes. It might be a cop-out answer, but Daisy Jones and the Six is one of my favorite books of all time. And that book has a lot of loose correlations with one of my favorite bands, Fleetwood Mac. And yeah, Daisy Jones is essentially Stevie Nicks. So there's a lot of like hints of songs in that book. Like whenever I read that book for the first time, I thought of the song Landslide, and I thought of the song The Chain. So yeah, if I would have to pick one, it would be Daisy Jones and the Six, because that book just reminds me a lot of Fleetwood Mac. Hey Joanna, thank you so much. Not for me. What's not for you? I don't know. Hello. Yes, that's the plan, Chaz. Oh, sound is fine. Okay, that's good. It's sorted out? Okay, great. All right, off to the second question. Uh, what is the second question? Okay, comes from Cat Lady Penny, who just won the free book giveaway. I just uploaded that today. She won the free book. Congratulations. And she asks, what book influenced your reading as a kid, which led to The King love? Now, it's interesting because I read a lot when I was like a really little kid, like in elementary school. But basically, when I got to middle school and high school, I stopped reading and started focusing a lot more on music. And then I really didn't start reading again until I got to college. So I don't think anything from elementary school like led me to reading Stephen King. I think if anything, it was the movies I was watching, which my dad basically let me watch any movie I wanted to growing up, and a lot of those included Stephen King films. So, yeah, I think more than anything, that's what led me to it. Because one of the first King books that I read back when I started reading again in college was The Shining. And the reason I read that was because I knew Doctor Sleep was coming out. And The Shining was one of my favorite movies. It still is. So that's kind of what led me to it, really, is was his movies, less so what I read as a kid. Hopefully that makes sense. Yes, she got a free book. I think oh, yeah, the book she got was The Grapes of Wrath. So, that's the book I bought her. Okay, what's the next question? Let's see. This comes from, Chris Mohan. If you could ask Mr. King one question and one question only, what would it be? Oh, man. Uh, I wanna ask him lots of questions. Um, I might ask him because I know he said he's written books or he started writing books that didn't go anywhere and that didn't pan out. I'd want to ask him if he regrets not getting any of those published or not finely tuning and working on them more because a lot of the books he worked on early on in his career didn't work out, but he came back to them later on in his career, just like with Under the Dome. He started writing that in the 70s, but he quickly realized, like, oh, this is way over my head. I'm not going to be able to write this book and make it coherent. And then, but he came back to it years later and it worked out. I think same thing with 11/22/63. He initially up with that idea, but he was like, man, I got to do so much research for this. I don't have time for this. And then, he came out with Blaze, which was famously one of his trunk novels that he wrote in the 70s. And then he rewrote it and then published it again. So I would want to ask him like if there's any books that he regrets not being able to finish. Like he came up with an idea and he thought it was great, but he just couldn't get it to work. I'd want to ask him that question. One of my favorite books. Congratulations. Well, she didn't win it. Cat Lady Penny did. Oh, and that's the same thing. Okay. And the next question. And if any of y'all have any questions to ask me, just leave it down and I'll get to it. Let's see. It's a lot of just people congratulating me, which again, thank you guys so much. I don't know if I've said it yet, but thank you guys so much for continuing to support the channel. And this comes from Bookish Chaz. My question is, what is one thing that you wish you had known when you first started reading King that you would tell newbies now? That is a great question. Because I've read almost everything he's read, and probably my one regret is saving a lot of his worst books, some of his like most unpopular books for last, because he has like 70 plus books. And when you first started reading it, or when you first start reading him, the initial reaction is, oh, let's read his best stuff right away. I wish I would have told myself, like, maybe you should sprinkle in some of his bad books in between some of the great books, not only to make the great books look better, but also when you get to the last chunk of books, say you have like 20 books left, and they're all crap. I mean, it wasn't all crap, but I got to like the last 20 books and like it felt like every other book I read was just either bad or mediocre. So I would tell people if you're interested in reading all of Stephen King's books, obviously read his good ones, but also sprinkle in some of the more unpopular books. I don't know if that helps anybody, but uh, yes, Penny won. How much do you love Twilight? Oh man. Honestly, I can't really say. I mean, I always, I'm with the Twilight haters, but honestly, I've never read a book and I've never watched the movies. So who knows? I might like it. I won't like it. Really? Ugh. Andrew, it's my least favorite thing ever. They ruined that name. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you. Thank you so much. Interesting answer. Very helpful. Yes. Awesome. Uh, Tell me why you were wrong about The Stand. I mean, I definitely have an unpopular opinion. I don't think it's terrible. I don't understand why it's people's favorite. Like for me, it just has too many problems. Like part 1, it starts out, it's terrific. A lot of great horror elements. And then after that, it turns into a completely different novel. And I thought a lot of it was boring. I thought the ending was crap. So yeah, I mean, the characters are fine. A lot of them are great, but just the book as a whole, it's fine. But a lot of people say it's the best thing that he's ever written, which I completely and 100% disagree with. So sorry, Andrew. Your opinion on Lord of I don't know what that means, Nicola. And thank you, Andrew. Thank you. And speaking of Penny, congratulations on your free book. Ponderings of Pete. Oh god. No more state from can we just stop this already? I get this every day from people. Please stop it. Oh man. Ugh. Have you read much indie horror or what of some of your non-favorite king horror? Or not yeah, sorry, I can't speak. Your favorite non-king horror. So I did a video a while back on like my top 10 horror books that are not Stephen King. So some of my favorite horror authors are like Zoe Stage, Caroline Kepnes, Stephen Graham Jones. Like there are a lot of great horror books that aren't King, and there are a lot of great horror books that are indie. I recently just read one by Braden Reddick called Ungodly, which was recommended to me by Sharon. I would definitely go check out that book. That's a great indie horror book. Your opinion on Lord of the Rings movies and books. Um, it's fine. I'm not a huge fan of it. I mean, I grew up watching the movies and I really liked them. I haven't watched them in a long time, and I still haven't seen the Hobbit movies. I read the books, and actually, I liked the Hobbit probably the best. And then the books, like I didn't love them, but I also didn't hate them. They were kind of just fine. I definitely get the appeal to why people love them, and I know why they're so popular. But for me, I wasn't a huge fan of the writing style, and I just love modern fantasy more, so that's my opinion on that. Uh, Low key agree with you on something. Yes, definitely. And probably one of my favorite things about making this channel is just like spewing out my unpopular King opinions and realizing how many people also have those unpopular opinions. So, yes. And you're welcome, Penny. Oh my God. Please. I respect you too, Andrew. Immense respect. Oh God, floppy shoes. Oh man, do I really have to tell that story? Oh God, I made this bet with my girlfriend Stacy that she couldn't read. It was like 3 books in 48 hours, and she did. And then I had to read just the worst book that I've ever read. It is this clown horror erotica book, and it was really bad. Luckily, it was only like 40 pages, so it wasn't like too long. But good God, that book was just a pile of shit. Yeah, floppy shoes. Not good. Okay, let me get to back. Let me get back to some of these questions here. Um, okay, this comes from Mark. When did you decide you were going to try and read all of Stephen King's books, and how long did it take you? So technically, James, what's up? Technically, I have not yet read all of his books because I haven't read Gwendy's Final Task, and I haven't obviously read his new book. But Black House is a book that I've DNF'd several times, and I've never been able to read it. But I've read basically all of his books. I quickly decided, like I said, back in college when I started reading Stephen King, like after I read The Shining, Doctor Sleep, and then some of his other classic books, I was like, all right, I love Stephen King and I want to read all of his books. And I've been doing that basically for the past decade or so. And it's been great. Uh, no, no, no more book bets with Stacy. I've learned my lesson. No, thank you. But what was your favorite part of Floppy Shoes? When it ended, the end. Are you looking forward to reading the fairy tale? Yes, I am. That's one of my most anticipated releases of the year. I really hope it's not connected to the Talisman in any way. Like I said, that's my least favorite King book. And Fairy Tale is supposed to be a fantasy book. And of course, whenever King releases a new book, he's always very vague about what it's about. So I'll go into it with middling expectations, but we'll see. You're on island alone, and you can only choose one Stephen King book. I mean, my absolute favorite is The Dead Zone, so I might go with that one. Yeah, I guess I'll go with The Dead Zone. That is my favorite. Yes. I live in fear of black. Me too. I have tried to read that several times, and it's never worked out. Clippy erotica. Oh my god. Talisman and Bag of Bones are my least favorite. Yeah, I didn't like Bag of Bones either when I first read it. I am interested to go back and reread it, but I don't have high expectations for it. Yes, Ian. Dead Zone. My all-time favorite. We're gonna read that. I'm gonna have a buddy read it for it in October. Read along. That's what I'm trying to say, a read along. What's the next question? This comes from the Avid Reader. Are there any longer Stephen King books which you both like and at the same time like its ending? Now, this is a very common complaint I have with a lot of longer Stephen King books. Like The Stand has a terrible ending. Under the Dome has like one of the worst endings ever. But he does have some longer books that have great endings. And probably the best example would be the Dark Tower book, or book 7, like the final book. Like the very ending of that book is awesome. And of course, I won't spoil it, but that's probably one of his best endings. And it's a chunker of a book. It's like 1,000 pages. So that one, Wizard in Glass has a great ending. Wolves of the Kala. So basically, his Dark Tower books all have good endings. Yeah. Oh, Pete, that's a tough question. Favorite Ray Bradbury short story? Oh man. I think I'll have to think about that one. I'll get back to you on that. There's too many to choose from. How do you feel about the character Holly Gibney? She seems to divide fans, and with a new Holly book coming after Fairy Tale. That's a good question. The first time I read the Bill Hodges trilogy, I wasn't a huge fan of her. But I read The Outsider and I liked her a little bit more. And then when I read If It Bleeds, which that has a novella in it that's sort of Holly's story, I actually grew to like her even more. So I'm actually very interested to read a Holly Gibney book, and I think it's supposed to take place in COVID, or like during COVID, the pandemic, and she, has some tendencies to yeah, I'm very excited for it. So I've come to love Holly as a character. Would you like to meet Stephen King in person? I would, but I would probably be terrified. But I don't know. It would be fun. Favorite book with drumming? Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie, one of my all-time favorite books. Let me go get it real quick. I mean, I've talked about this enough on my channel here, but yes. Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie. My all-time favorite drum book. It's a middle grade book. I've read that several times. Talk about multiple Bradbury short stories if need be, because it really is impossible. Okay. Yeah, I mean, The Illustrated Man is probably my favorite, and there's a lot in there that I love. Probably The Veldt. I mean, that's a very popular opinion. I love The Veldt. There's one called Mariana's Ink, which is all about like clones, and that one's probably one of my favorites. Oh yeah, there's a really short one in October Country called The Scythe, and that's all about this guy who like has this farm, and he essentially is like the Grim Reaper, and every time he like uses a scythe to like chop down whatever, like each one of those is like taking a life away, and that one's really good. And then there's a really short one that's I can't remember what it's called, but it's essentially about this guy who creates this machine that's like able to fly, that you're able to fly with. And then yeah, that his short stories are hard to talk about because you don't want to give too much away, but that one, if you know what I'm talking about, Pete, that one's really good. Looking forward to it. Yes. Why can't I get you to read Necroscope by Lumley? Stephen King said it was great. Oh, well, if Stephen King said it was great, then I have to read it, right? Yeah, I mean, I might give it a shot. I mean, I have a lot of books to read, so we'll see. Don't know if you are a Pantera fan or not, but what are your thoughts on their recently announced tribute tour? I like a few Pantera songs. They're not one of my excuse me. They're not one of my absolute favorites. I like Cowboys from Hell, Walk, Cemetery Gates. There's a few Pantera songs I like, but they're not like one of my favorites. But I have no idea. I'll have to look into that. I don't really know what that is. What's one King book you would love to see adapted, and one you wish you could forget having seen the adaptation for? There's several. I think I'm going to do a video on this soon. Duma Key is one of my absolute favorite King books, and I think that would make a tremendous miniseries, like a 10 episode, just one and done. I think that would be tremendous. The Long Walk should have been adapted by now. That came out in like 79. I think that would make a really interesting movie. Also, Revival would be a great one. Like there's so many. Yes, it is a great question. I've tried to get him to read David Gemmell already. Again, I have a lot of books to read. Do you have any fantasy recommendations for someone who hasn't read or really watched anything in the genre? I've been recommending people Michael J. Sullivan as like a good fantasy starting point, because his books are really easy to get into. They have a lot of common fantasy tropes, but at the same time, he has his own spin on them, and his characters are really good and quirky and funny. Very fast paced. I think those are probably like the easiest books to get into. Okay, let me get back to some of the questions here. Okay, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name here, but this is from Adim Azana. What other Stephen King books would you recommend to someone who would like to get into it? The only other one I've read was Carrie. Well, Carrie is a pretty damn good starting point for me. Other ones would be The Shining, Misery. Like if you want to go on the horror side, those are some good ones. Pet Cemetery. Yeah, and then some of his more popular ones I wouldn't necessarily say are the best starting places. Like It and The Stand, while they do have good elements, like they're huge. So I don't want you to get like too invested in it and not have a good payoff for it. But yeah, like The Shining, Misery, The Dead Zone. Yeah, those are some pretty good places to start. All right, thanks, Ian. All right, next question. This is from Bob Ogre. From drummer to drummer, what kind of kit do you have? Because your set sounds really crisp and nice. Well, thank you. I have a Ludwig. Um, it's a it's a 6 piece. It's got bass, snare, two rack toms, two floor toms, and a lot of broken cymbals. I need new cymbals, but yeah, I bought it last year because I had my old like I don't even remember what brand it was, but I had my old drum set for like 10 years. I had it since high school and it was just beaten down. And then one day I was like playing on the bass drum and like my bass pedal went through my bass drum head. I was like, enough of this. I'm getting a new set. So I, ponied up like 1,000 or $1,100 for a new set and bought it last year and I love it. It looks great. It sounds great. So I'm very happy with it. Next question. This is from Barlow and Straker's Fine Films and Books. Now, he's a relatively small booktuber. I'm going to shout him out here. He's got some good Stephen King content. He did a rant review on The Talisman, which is just one of my favorite rant reviews I've ever seen. He has 2 questions. If you had to pick one, who is your all-time favorite drummer? That would easily be John Bonham from Led Zeppelin. Just ever since I started listening to Zeppelin back in middle school, he just has always been my favorite drummer. I always try to emulate him, but can never quite sound like him, of course. Just, I love his playing style. I love how he can just play in multiple different genres. Yeah, he's my favorite. If I had to pick a second favorite, that one's hard. I love Steve Gadd. I love Mike Portnoy. I love Anika Neelis, who is like a young uh, woman drummer. She's really good. But yeah, I have a lot of, like Mitch Mitchell from Jimi Hendrix is one of the most underrated drummers because obviously everyone knows who Jimi Hendrix is, but not a lot of people know who Mitch Mitchell is. He is amazing. So yeah, those are like some of my favorite all-time drummers. But if I had to pick one, it would definitely be Bonzo. Oh yeah, and his second question. Are you a fan of Metallica? They're probably my absolute favorite band, and I was curious on your thoughts. I love early Metallica. I love their 80s thrash metal stuff. So Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, especially Master of Puppets, and Justice for All. Like those albums are great. And then the Black Album is fine. Like Enter Sandman, obviously. But then a lot of those songs are kind of overrated. And Lars, like the drummer Lars, just really tones down his playing style. Like, if you go back and listen to some of his earlier stuff, he can really drum. But then just some of his newer stuff isn't as good as his older stuff. So I love early Metallica. Let's just go with that. Your opinion about Steven Adler and Matt Sorum. By the way, I'm a big fan of Guns N' Roses. Okay. I I would say Steven Adler is better. If you go back and listen to Appetite, I think the drums are way better than the drums that are on Use Your Illusion. Use Your Illusion just, I mean, it's not bad by any means, but Steven Adler, like if you go back, listen to Appetite, like Welcome to the Jungle is like secretly a really good drum song. Paradise City is one of my, I was just playing that the other day. That's one of my favorite drum songs. Yeah, I would definitely go with Steven Adler. Hey, Anita. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Next question. Uh, it's Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads. How much respect do you have for me? I have immense respect for you, Andrew, and I'm sure you do for me as well. All right, next question. Okay, this is the last question from the comment section. Fionn Kerwin asks, top 5 albums that are not well known that you think people should check out. So I had already read that question and I wrote down my answers because I knew I would forget otherwise. But here's some like really good albums that I like that probably a lot of y'all have never heard of. I'll start out with one like Deep Purple is very famous, but a lot of people only know Smoke on the Water, which they have so many other great songs besides that. But one of my favorite albums, or probably my favorite album by them, is Who Do We Think We Are? Has 7 songs. They're all terrific, but not a lot of people have actually heard of them. Probably the most famous one is Woman from Tokyo, which is fairly popular, but still. And then the rest of them are fairly unknown songs, but they're really good. Another band is Mammoth, in their self-titled album Mammoth, and that's by the son of Eddie Van Halen, who I'm sure a lot of y'all know who that is, one of the greatest guitar players of all time. His son is really good, and his album is very good. Like I said, one of my favorite drummers is Steve Gadd, and he's played with a bunch of musicians. He's essentially a studio musician. He's played for Steely Dan, Paul Simon, Stevie Wonder, Paul McCartney, you name it. He's played for them. And he's recently put out a bunch of his solo stuff. And so he's got an album called 70 Strong, which is like instrumental jazz rock. It's really good. And then, like I said, one of my favorite drummers of all time is Anika Neelis, and she is awesome. She has a couple albums out, one of my all-time favorite drummers. And then a band that I saw open up for Dream Theater. Dream Theater is one of my all-time favorite bands, but the opening act for them was a band called Arch Echo. They're instrumental progressive metal, and they were amazing. So those are some lesser known artists that I would shout out. All right, and that's all of the questions from my video. Hopefully, I'm not missing any. But like I said, y'all can come down here and comment any question you want, and I will answer it. Let's see. Thank you, avid reader. Yeah, I am getting close to 1,000 subs. It's pretty crazy. Uh, yeah, when I started my channel last year, I honestly was hoping to just hit 100 subs. Like that was my goal for last year, and then just it's been going up and up ever since. So I'm very lucky to have a very good audience. In your opinion, who's the best villain out of these three? Kurt Barlow, Pennywise, or Randall Flagg? Hmm. I would probably go with Pennywise. I think he's got the most interesting ability to like take someone's fear and use it against them. I really like that idea. Kurt Barlow, I'm not a huge fan of vampires, but he's probably one of the better ones. But yeah, I would say out of these three, and of course Randall Flagg being from the Dark Tower, and like he's great, but I would probably go with Pennywise. And thank you, by the way. No, no what? No Mastodon drummer. I have not listened to a lot of Mastodon. I know they're a pretty heavy band. I I think one of the reasons why I don't listen to them is because of like the growly vocals. I can't really do that. I like more clean vocals. So even though like there's a lot of great bands that sound really good, if they have a singer that just is like, ugh, like I really don't like that style of singing. Have you listened to Epica? Is that a band or an audiobook? What is that, Chaz? I don't know what that is. Um, I'll write that down just in case I forget. I don't know what that is. Let me know what that is, Chaz. Epica. Okay. What Stephen King books would you recommend to accompany reading The Dark Tower? Now, this is a great question because I get this question a lot. Like, oh, the reading order for Dark Tower seems crazy. You got to read like 20 or 30 other books to like get the true experience. I completely disagree with that. I had one of my yeah, one of my best friends read The Dark Tower in its entirety, and the only other Stephen King book he had read previously was Misery, and he really enjoyed The Dark Tower. So you don't have to read anything else. by Stephen King to enjoy The Dark Tower, but for my money, if I had to choose, like, a few books to read just to, like, enhance your experience, it would definitely be Salem's Lot because book 5 essentially spoils that, and it has a main character from Salem's Lot in it, so I would go with that one, and then I would probably go with, Everything's Eventual, which is a short story collection. It has a few, Dark Tower stories in there that, like, directly tie into the Dark Tower. And then Hearts in Atlantis also has something that ties into the Dark Tower. Um, if you wanna get it doesn't really have, like, a hard connect, but if you wanna, like, just get some enjoyment from some Dark Tower connections, Eyes of the Dragon is really good. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. Let me look at my shelf. Uh, uh, I mean, yeah, those are the main ones, and then, obviously, The Stand has a pretty hard connect, so you could do that. It has some connections. Desperation has a little bit of connections, but yeah, for my money, mainly Salem's Lot, if I had to pick one. But yeah, you definitely don't have to read any other books along with The Dark Tower to also enjoy The Dark Tower. Just, that's my money. Uh, James, they have three singers and vocals are different from song to song. Huh, that's interesting. Um, could you name one favorite fictional character in any book? Or if that's too hard in Stephen King. Like my all-time favorite character in any book? Holy crap. Uh I have to look at my books. I don't know. Uh that might be really hard. I guess I could go with am I pointing right? I guess I would go with John Cleaver from the John Cleaver series. The first book being I Am Not a Serial Killer. John Cleaver is definitely one of my favorite characters. I don't know if he would be my absolute favorite, but that's definitely one of them. And then if I had to go with the Stephen King book, uh, that's also hard. A few of them would be Eddie Dean from the Dark Tower series and Edgar Freemantle from Doomakey. Those are, and then Wireman also from Doomakey. Those are some of my favorites. Johnny Smith from the Dead Zone is also one of my favorites. Um, and then Annie Wilkes is probably my favorite villain. So those are my favorites. Okay, jazz. Let's see. It's a European symphonic metal band. They do covers of classical pieces and movie themes, as well as their own original stuff. Their cover of the Imperial March is epic. All right, well, let's circle that. I will definitely check that out. Um, is it instrumental or does it have lyrics to it? Because if it's instrumental, I would love to listen to that while I read stuff. Because I do that a lot. I'll listen to instrumental, either like classical or metal or jazz, like depending on what genre I'm reading. I like to listen to instrumental music. So if it's instrumental, I'll definitely check that out. What 2 years did Stephen King not release a book, including novels and short story collections? Am I being quizzed right now? Oh, shoot. I could probably figure this out. Um, I think one of them is 1976 because Carrie was 1974, Salem's Lot was 75, and then I think he had a year break and he published The Shining in 77. So I think that's one of them. Other than that, though, hasn't he released a book every single year after that? I don't know. I did not expect to be quizzed in my own live show. Uh, it does help that all of my Stephen King books are in publication order. Uh, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I've got nothing. Let's see. What Stephen King book do you think would make a cool animated adaptation? Ooh. Uh, hmm, maybe The Dark Tower. That'd be kind of cool. Uh, maybe The Regulators, because that book is already so bonkers, and the way that book is written, that might actually work better as an animated adaptation. So yeah, The Dark Tower would be cool, but also The Regulators. Um, yeah, I'd go with The Regulators. They do instrumental as well as some vocal pieces. All right, awesome. Awesome, awesome. Do you think that Gurm will finish the Song of Ice and Fire series one day? Let me get a drink before I ramble about this. So, A Song of Ice and Fire is my all-time favorite series, and uh, I read book 5, I think about 7 years ago, and I've been waiting for book 6 ever since. My hope is that he can at least get book 6 out, Winds of Winter. If he can at least do that, because I really don't have high hopes for him getting book 7 out. If it's already taken him 11 years to finish book 6 and he's already in his mid 70s, I don't have a lot of hope for him to finish book 7. But if we can at least get book 6, then we can at least see the direction he's going to go in with some of these characters and plot points so that we can kind of at least distinguish between the book and the show. Because obviously the show went in a, at least with some of the characters, went in a vastly different direction than the characters. So I just want to know like where Jamie is actually going and where, just like I probably shouldn't spoil anything, but yeah, I just want to know like what character directions are going to go in. And then obviously, like he said before that like the show has killed off some characters that are still alive in the books, and that the show kept some of the characters alive that are going to be dead in the books. So I really just want to know at least like what direction he's going to go in. That's my answer. Uh really 1988? Are you sure about that? Maybe. I don't know. And then 2000 actually makes sense because, well, no, because I'm pretty sure he released On Writing in 2000, right? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'll have to double check. Again, I did not think I would be quizzed on my own live show. But yeah, that's still an interesting question. I have to run Mastodon album. All right, thanks, James. I will here. I'll write it down. Mastodon, Crack the Sky. Okay, I will eventually listen to that, and I'll get you my opinion on it. Yeah, I figured. Yeah, 1976. I'm pretty sure because his first collection didn't come out until 78, which was Night Shift. And yeah, pretty sure 76. And then 2000 also would make sense because that's like right around the time his accident happened. So that would make sense. No, I'm pretty sure it's 78. I'm pretty sure. Let me Google this shit. I'm pretty sure it's 1978. Night Shift, 1970. Yeah, Night Shift was definitely 1978, my friend. So yeah, 76 is yeah. I mean, it's okay. We all make mistakes. But yeah, that was a very good question. Caught me off guard, but yeah, I got one answer right. My top 5 Stephen King characters. Judd from Pet Sematary. Solid. Mike from It. Oh yeah, and then Roland from Dark Tower. Yeah. Pennywise, very good villain. And then Father Callahan from Salem's Lot and Dark Tower. He's not one of my favorites, but yeah, I completely understand. It's a pretty solid list. I've got to run. Thanks, Chaz. Thank you. And yes, hopefully we can hit 1K soon. Hi, Jake from Slovakia. Thank you, Adam. I know how to pronounce your first name, but not your last name. Halaz? Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Let me I'm curious now, Fionn. You've got me confused about what years. He didn't I'm pretty sure he released a book in 1988. Possibly. Wikipedia actually has a pretty good list on his bibliography, so I might just check that out and check out all these years. Yeah, definitely not 1976. Well, 1988, he didn't release a novel, but did he release anything in that year? Oh, and then what about 2000? Okay. Collections? No. Okay. Nonfiction. Okay, yeah. So in 2000, he did release On Writing, which is his nonfiction memoir slash writing advice thing. So he did release a book in 2000. So I guess 1976 and 1988, he did not release a book. So that's fairly interesting. All right. We all learn something new every day. But he released On Writing in 2000. I just looked it up. But yeah, 1976 and 1988. Yep. Excuse me. What are your favorite fantasy series other than Dark Tower and Game of Thrones? So yeah, A Song of Ice and Fire is my favorite, and then Dark Tower is somewhere in my top 5. My second favorite series is Stormlight Archive. Love it. And then some of my other favorites are the Witcher series, and Gentlemen Bastards is really good, by Scott Lynch, and Legends of the First Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. Love that. A really underrated one would be Song of the Shattered Sands by Bradley P. Bulio, with the first book being 12 Kings and Cherokee. So those are some of my favorite. And then Poppy War, I really love that trilogy. Let me make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Yeah, those are my favorites. So Stormlight Archive is like my second favorite besides A Song of Ice and Fire. Good question, Anita. Why does the Stephen King pop hate Bookish Drummer? He hates me because I tend to have unpopular opinions, and I actually say which Stephen King books I don't like, and some of those tend to be some of his more popular books. So he really can't wrap his mind around the fact that I'm not a huge fan of The Stand, and that I think it is overrated. And then also, I tend to like some of his least popular books, like Roadwork and The Colorado Kid. So he's just very confused and disgruntled about my overall opinions on his works. He thinks that I have weird opinions. That's sort of where it stems from. But yeah, good question. BC Fortenberry, if Georgie Boy doesn't finish the series, which author would you choose to complete, if any? It's a very difficult question. A lot of people have thrown out Sanderson, which is the worst possible scenario. That would be horrible. But there are some good options. I think the one that would make the most sense is Daniel Abraham, and he's got some fantasy series under his belt already with the Long Price Quartet and Dagger and Coin, I believe, and then he also co-wrote uh, what's that series called? The Expanse series. So he's got a lot of series under his belt, and he's actually done. He's worked with George in the past. He's done like adaptations via comic books and graphic novels of A Song of Ice and Fire. So he's worked with George in the past, and yeah, I think Daniel Abraham would make the most sense out of anybody. Um, Definitely not Sanderson. That would just be that would be god awful. But yeah, I think Daniel Abraham would make the most sense. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but if it does, I think that would probably be the best fit. Um Whoops. Oh yeah, you did spell that wrong. GGRM. Oh well. Uh Use Your Illusion 1 or 2. Whew. I gotta remember what songs are in which album. Uh I think the way that I remember it was 1 was better overall, but 2 had, like, a lot of, like, great songs. Like, it had "Knocking on Heaven's Doors," "Get in the Ring," "You Could Be Mine," which are really great. But then 1, I think just overall had a lot of great ones. So I'd probably go with 1. 1978. Yeah, it's okay. We all make mistakes. No big deal. Hey, how's it going? Oh, Roadworks. Can't wait to read it despite some people complaining about it. Already have my copy. Yes, I think Roadwork is probably his most underrated. Whenever I would go, like when I first started reading King, I would go look at ranking lists of like all the books that he had written at the time. Almost without fail, Roadwork would either be at the very bottom or somewhere in the top 5. So I was always like, let's stay away from that book. This is generally not a lot of people's favorites. And then when I eventually read it, my expectations were severely lowered. So I went into it and I was like, it's probably not going to be very good, but I'll give it a shot. And then I turned out to love it and I gave it 5 stars. I get why people don't love it or Stephen King fans don't love it because it's very atypical of him. There's no supernatural element, there's no horror elements. It's basically just this dude slowly losing his mind over the fact that like his place of work and his home is just going to be destroyed by this highway company, and it's just a day in the life of, well, a day in the several lives of him, but just his thought processes on like how he's dealing with everything and like his plan to get revenge. And I thought it was really good. Me and Josephina did a live show for the Bachman books, and we both really liked that. That's still my favorite Richard Bachman book. So yeah, Roadwork definitely is very underrated. Um, Fantastic in character work. Okay, I still need to read Daniel Abraham. I haven't yet read. I started Leviathan Wakes and I couldn't get into it, but I want to try his fantasy books out. So Long Price Quartet and Dagger and Coin, I believe it is. So I definitely want to give him a shot. Oh, well, chances are, if you're already really enjoying it, you'll probably enjoy the rest of it. But for me, I really couldn't get invested in any of the characters. I thought a lot of it was boring and just easily my least favorite. So if you're already enjoying it, chances are you're going to enjoy all of it. So more power to you, Mark. I really didn't enjoy it. But yeah, to each his own. It would make sense. Yes, it would. I don't drink. I've sipped alcohol in the past, but I've pretty much made it a point where I've had people in my life abuse alcohol, and I don't want a substance to have control over me, so I choose not to drink alcohol. I've sipped alcohol before, and honestly, the only one that tasted remotely good was Mike's Hard Lemonade. uh, Probably just because it had so much sugar in it. But yeah, I don't drink alcohol. Uh, yeah, so Sorry if that's a bit boring, but there you go. Um, has George R. R. Martin written? Yes, I would recommend a lot of his stuff. If you can see, oh, if you can see here, all of these two shelves here are George R. R. Martin. This top shelf is all of Song of Ice and Fire, and then this bottom shelf is all of his older stuff. So his older sci-fi horror stuff. For me, I would probably recommend you trying out Dream Songs Volume 1, which is essentially a collection of a lot of his best early science fiction stuff. That one I read, and he quickly became my favorite author of all time because I was like, oh, yeah, Song of Ice and Fire, my favorite series. And then I read his other stuff. I was like, oh, yeah, he can actually write other stuff. And yeah, in that one, you get stories like A Song for Leah, which is really good. Night Flyers. What else do you get? Sand Kings. Like he has a lot of great stuff that no one really has read. But yeah, it's really good. And actually, funny enough, like obviously, A Song of Ice and Fire is extremely popular. But if you go back to his early career, he's actually won more awards, Hugo, Nebula, and whatever kind of awards for his older sci-fi and horror stuff. So I think that's pretty interesting. But yeah, definitely go check out Dream Songs Volume 1. I'd recommend that. And if you love that, you know, do what I did and just get it. And a lot of these books are out of print, so they're all like old mass market paperback copies, which I love. But yeah, I went down a rabbit hole and started just reading all of his stuff. Um, Blasphemer. I don't know what to tell you. Just not a huge fan of the alcoholic beverages. And in fact, I don't know if I think I've told this in some of my videos, but even if I did drink alcohol a couple of years ago, I stopped drinking basically everything but water. And that's the main reason why I was able to lose like over 100 pounds. Because I used to just drink like 4 cans of Mountain Dew a day. I would drink sugary drinks like crazy, lemonade, tea, Gatorade. Basically, just stopped doing that and just drank water and worked out. And then I lost a bunch of weight. So even if I were to drink alcohol, I wouldn't even now because it wouldn't be very healthy. All right. Next question from Nicola. Did you read Wheel of Time? I read the first book. I read Eye of the World. Excuse me. And I thought parts of it were good, but overall the pacing was just so wonky. Like it would have like very long stretches where nothing happened and it was very slow. And then all of a sudden we would get something happening. And then it would get slow again. You're just like, wait a minute. Well, what about this stuff? And just the pacing was all over the place. Very mixed bag. Wasn't a huge fan of most of the characters. So I think I gave the book like 2.5 stars, 3 stars. But I was like, okay, it's the first book. I'll give book 2 a try and then we'll see. I ended up DNFing book 2 about 200 pages in and I just wasn't feeling it. So yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of Wheel of Time. I understand why people love it, but I recognize that it's just not for me. It's probably a series that I'll never go back and actually finish. Have you read the book The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker? No, I have not, but I will write that down and check it out after I finish. What's that about, by the way? If you can say it in a non-spoilery way. But yeah, I have not heard of that, but I love getting like just random recommendations from people. So recently, George R. R. Martin said he's going to change his ending for the Game of Thrones series, which made me very happy, and I hope he gets to finish it. Yeah, I mean, even when I was watching season 8, I was like, Like, even if, like, even if it's, like, similar, like season 8 was bad, and most people would agree with that. I started really hating the show around season 5 and season 6 because they just started making some wonky changes, but season 8, I know people hated it, but I could see it going in that direction, but the way George writes, he's gonna write it in a much more compelling way. Like, what happened with a certain character, like, they just snapped. George isn't gonna do that. He's gonna be much more nuanced, and he's actually gonna write it in a way that makes sense and that's, like, believable. So, I could see it going in that direction, but at the same time, the show just omits so many characters that are in the books. Like, there's a character introduced at the very tail end of book 3 that's, I'm assuming, is gonna be important to the end, or at least book 6 or 7. And then there's characters introduced in book 5 that's just like, why would he introduce these characters so late in the series if they're not gonna have some sort of interesting payoff? So, even if the ending is somewhat similar, it's gonna veer off in different directions here and there because of just the amount of characters that either the show has already killed off or that they've omitted. So, even if it's a similar ending, I'm still interested to see what George does with it. That's for sure. Where did you buy your drum kit? I bought it on Musician's Friends. I think I got like a deal for it. Yeah, I think I got it for like 1100 bucks. It's expensive, but it looks and sounds really good and I love it. Um but yeah, I definitely need to get more cymbals. They're all of mine are starting to get cracked. I also want to get if I had like a wish list for like stuff that I would want on my drum set, um I would want a new ride cymbal that sounds like it just sounds crisp. My all of mine have all sounded dull and lifeless. I also want a new hi-hat, and then, like I said, cymbals that aren't cracked would be great. But yeah, I love my drum set though, like my drum set that I bought last year. I would probably want newer heads because I haven't bought new heads since last year, so that would also probably be a good idea. But yeah, I love my drum set. Sh Yeah, I would agree with that. Any place in the world you really wanna visit and why? Uh, Probably my bucket list would be, Seattle to go see a Seahawks game in person. I'm probably gonna wait a few years though because we just traded our, like, all-star, uh, all-pro quarterback in Russell Wilson. He's been on our team for like 10 years and then we traded him. So probably the next couple of seasons we're going to play like shit. So I don't want to go then. But eventually, once we start getting good again, I would want to go take a trip to Seattle and go see a game. And then, there's got to be some interesting stuff to see in Seattle too. So that would be a lot of fun. Keiju, I can't put that on screen because that's definitely a spoiler. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you a lot. Thank you, thank you. Uh, Adam, what is your opinion on Malazan? A lot of people tend to like love Malazan, like it's their favorite thing ever, or they just really can't get into it. I'm in the middle. I'm kind of a Malazan centrist, if that's the right word. Like I enjoy it, but it's not the best thing I've ever read. Like I go into every Malazan book knowing that there's going to be chapters that I'm really going to love and characters that I'm really going to love, and then there's going to be content in it that I'm just like indifferent about or just I don't care. So I kind of take the centrist approach where I'm like, okay, these books are good. Some of them are pretty good, but it's never going to be like an all-time favorite for me. I've read the first 3 books, and actually still probably my favorite is book 1, which for a lot of people either book 2 or 3 is like some of their favorite books in the series. But for me, book 1 was the best. Book 3 had some really good moments, but it was just too long. Like it's just so long-winded. I'm going to read book 4 relatively soon. I have no idea when. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Malice. What are your hopes for Fairy Tale? Um, I'm really hoping it's not connected to Talisman or the Talisman in Black House. Hopefully it's its own thing. Like it's a standalone and it's its own thing. I really hope it's not connected to the Talisman. But if it is, oh god, I don't even want to think about it. But I have sort of middling expectations. I am excited because obviously Stephen King is one of my favorites, but we'll see. Either way, I'm just excited for new King. I don't know if anyone asked this, but what are your thoughts on the upcoming Salem Slot adaptation? I know it's coming out, but I haven't heard too much about it. Honestly, I don't watch a lot of TV and movies anymore. I'm either reading, playing drums, working. That's it. But yeah, I don't really watch a lot of TV shows. And some of my favorite TV shows have had like new seasons come out in the past like year or so. And I get excited for them and I'm just like I don't really have time for this. Like Stranger Things season 4, still haven't seen it. Barry, one of my all-time favorite shows, season 3, haven't watched it yet. Better Call Saul, haven't seen the new season. Uh, BoJack Horseman, I'm like several seasons behind. I think that show already ended. So yeah, I just don't watch a lot of TV shows and movies, but maybe I'll get to it. I don't know. Let's see. It's a Pulitzer Prize winning book. It says culture arise to reduce our fear towards death, and we are striving towards immortality. Psychologists came up with a theory about this book. What book is this again? Oh, okay. The denial of death. Okay. Okay. So is this more of a nonfiction book, possibly? I don't read too much nonfiction, but that actually sounds fairly interesting. Similar to the Last Messiah essay. I will also write that down. All right. Random question. Favorite meal? Uh, I love seafood. Um, Probably my favorite type of seafood when I can get it is lobster. It's usually very expensive, but yeah, seafood. I will eat any kind of seafood, and probably my favorite is lobster. Um, yeah, and then more of like a stereotypical answer and like an everyday kind of food would be pizza. I'm always in the mood for pizza, but yeah, seafood, it's my absolute favorite. Oh man. Oh, quick story about Super Bowl 49. So obviously I'm a Seahawks fan, and my brother, my older brother, is a Patriots fan. And we watched that Super Bowl together in our house. And tensions were very high. Like we were having a good time, but we were getting to the end and like we were marching down the field and we had that like tremendous like Jermaine Curse catch where he just catches it like on his back and like it's crazy. We're on like the 5 yard line. I'm like, we're gonna win, we're gonna win. And then obviously, Marshawn Lynch, first down, gets like 4 yards, almost gets into the end zone. And then after that, and honestly, like the reaction from both of us, like I was devastated, and he was initially not excited. He was just like, why did they throw it? Why didn't they run it? And then once he realized like the implication of it, he was like, yeah. And I just had my face in my hands. And after the end of the game, I shook my brother's hand and went to bed and just was depressed for several weeks. But oh man, that was just one of the worst sports moments for me. We were so close. Oh man. It is nonfiction? Okay, that's what I thought. Top sci-fi books. So my favorite trilogy of all time is The Themis Files by Sylvain Neville. Some of my favorite sci-fi books of all time. I love that series. Also, Project Hail Mary, which I read earlier this year. Pretty much everyone seems to love that book, and for good reason. That book is just so good. I went into that book thinking like, oh, I mean, I liked The Martian, so I'll probably like this one. But by the end of it, I just fell in love with it. Easily one of the best sci-fi books I've ever read. Um, I also love Ray Bradbury. A lot of his sci-fi is like short stories, and it's very good. So those are probably some of my favorite sci-fi books. Popkin, hey Evie, how's it going? Yes, it is very close. We're getting there. What other Stephen King books do you recommend reading before the Dark Tower series? I kind of went over this earlier. Probably the only one I would like say is a prerequisite would be Salem's Lot, because that is like a hard connect. And then, other than that, there are some other ones like The Stand, It, Everything's Eventual, Hearts in Atlantis, Eyes of the Dragon. Like all of those are connected, but you certainly don't have to read them to enjoy the Dark Tower. But yeah, I've already went over that, so I would say Salem's Lot. Um, I wish you would talk about Joyland by Stephen King. I love it so much. I don't know why nobody ever talks about it. I'm not sure where I ranked it in my ranking, but I did talk about it in my overall ranking. But you're right, it is a fairly unknown and less talked about Stephen King book. I think it's good. I wouldn't consider it a favorite of mine, but I could see why someone would love it. Yeah, it's one of the hard case crime books. Um, yeah, it's certainly not a bad book. I did enjoy it, but it's definitely not one of my all-time favorites. But yeah, it doesn't really get talked about a lot. Thank you. Trading Russell Wilson was the worst decision the Seahawks could ever make. I would agree, but also I sort of understand why they did it just because, like the past 5 years or so, we keep doing good in the regular season, but we just can't seem to like, get over the hump of like actually making it back to the Super Bowl. And Russell Wilson obviously being like a top 5 quarterback in the league is getting a ridiculous amount of money. So I think for us, we were just like, okay, if we can get rid of his contract and try to get some younger people in, you know, maybe we can make something happen. I mean, that's essentially what we did when we drafted Russell Wilson, because the first 4 years he played, he was playing on a minimum salary. And we just had so many young people that we were able to keep on the team. And then we just played really well. We can't really do that anymore if we had Russell Wilson on the team just because of his salary cap impact. So I hate it because he's the best quarterback we've ever had. I mean, I grew up watching Matt Hasselbeck, but Russell Wilson's clearly superior. But yeah, it does suck. At least he went to a team that I don't hate. He went to the Broncos. They're fine. I would have hated it if he went to like the Steelers. I hate the Steelers. Or, someone else. But like the Broncos, I'm fine with. I have zero issues with that. I mean, it's not bad. At least you won the Super Bowl. Yeah, I mean, it could have been worse, right? Like that could have been the first Super Bowl, and then we did that. That would have been terrible. But yeah, the year before was like my favorite sports moment ever because no one predicted the Seahawks were going to beat Peyton Manning and the Broncos. Everyone thought we were going to lose, and by the third quarter, we were shutting them out. Like, what was it, like 36-0, and just it was so glorious. But yeah. Yeah, Hey, Leslie. Yeah, I would agree. Salem's Lot is the one that I would go with for that, and it is very good. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I completely forgot about that. Insomnia. that definitely has a hard connect to the Dark Tower. Even though it's one of my least favorite Stephen King books. But the parts of it I did enjoy were the parts where it connected to the Dark Tower. So yeah, I would add that to the list too. Good catch there. Bye. Thank you for showing up. Matt Flynn. That's a name I haven't heard in a hot minute. Yeah, I was excited for Matt Flynn because the one of the last games he played before we signed him, he played for the Packers, I think, and he threw like 6 touchdowns. I was like, this guy's good. And then Russell Wilson just started lighting it up in the preseason. And I was like, I don't know, but maybe, I mean, we're giving Matt Flynn $10 million to sit on the bench. But then obviously, you know, all else is history. I already miss Russell. Man, I miss Russell. Our quarterback situation right now is less than ideal. Geno Smith and Drew Lock. Um, yeah, we're gonna suck. We're gonna suck. Do you ever have a bias towards a book because of where you were in life at the time or what it helped you get through? That's why I love to. Okay. I could see that. I don't know if I would consider that a bias. But yeah, I definitely agree with you that reading a book really depends on your mood. Like you can read a book like that under normal circumstances you would love, but because of your mood, like maybe you're just in a really shitty mood and you start reading it and you're just like, oh, this book sucks. Throw it across the room. And then other times you read a book that maybe under under normal circumstances you wouldn't necessarily love, but you're in a really giddy mood and you're just in a really happy-go-lucky mood and you read it and you're like, it's not that great, but I'm kind of enjoying it. So I can definitely see why mood would affect someone like that. If I had to think of like a specific example though, I don't know if I necessarily could. Um I can't really think of an example off the top of my head, but that is a very good question. Like if there was a book that um I can't think of anything. I'm sorry. I can't think of anything right now. Maybe something will pop in my head. Have you read any Robert Mccammon? I have one of his books, The Boy's Life. I think that's Robert Mccammon. I started reading that book, but again, speaking of mood, that book was actually a book I was reading and I just was not in the mood for it. I didn't really love the episodic nature of it. Like every chapter felt like it was trying to tell a story and there was some kind of conflict, new conflict introduced in every chapter. And it felt so episodic and I really wasn't enjoying it. But I know a lot of people have read it because of I think Baron from Your Brain on Books did a read along for it and I know a lot of people loved it. So maybe I'll go back and I'll be in a better mood and I will enjoy it more, but yeah, and I know he's written other stuff. He's written a book, I think it's called Swan Song, that's supposed to be a better version of The Stand, which I'm very interested in reading because, like I've said many times, I'm not a huge fan of The Stand. So, yeah, so I've heard of a couple of his books. I just haven't finished any of his books. Reading Lacey's story put me in a bad mood. I would agree to that. Uh, that book was not great. I really hated the lovey-dovey bullshit language that they had. I can't remember specifically what it was, but like they would say these certain phrases to each other that just every time I was just like, ugh, this is awful. And but the characters themselves were fine, and you know, like the trauma they went through was interesting to read about. But then, of course, King does a stupid thing where he like shoehorns in a supernatural element that doesn't need to be there. He did that with Rose Matter, and that just felt so egregious for me. And then End of Watch, the third book in the Bill Hodges trilogy. You read the first two books, and they're very grounded in reality. And then you get to the third book, and it's not. Ugh. It's also very weird that Lisey's story, King has said before in interviews that like that's his favorite book that he's ever written, probably because it's got a lot of ties with his wife. Uh, I mean, that's fine, but it's definitely not. It's definitely not one of my favorites. Ooh, that's a good question. Why don't you like hardcovers? It's not necessarily that I don't like them. I just much prefer paperbacks. Paperbacks are usually smaller, they're easier to read, they're easier to hold, and also they're cheaper. And that's probably actually the main or the real reason. Because back when I first got back into reading in college, I had a very small budget for books, and I would always just go to my local used bookstore called Paperbacks Inc. And they basically sold exclusively paperbacks for very cheap. And often I could go in there and just get tons of free paperbacks. And yeah, they're cheaper. Um, I think they're, like I said, I think they're easier to read. I can definitely read a paperback faster than I can a hardcover, and you can bend them. You can't really bend a hardcover. I definitely think paperbacks are superior, but again, to each their own. Besides football, name other sports you like to watch. Basically, football and basketball are my favorites. I'm a Seattle Seahawks fan, and I am a Miami Heat fan, which you're probably wondering, like, two opposite ends of the country. How does that happen? I grew up not really loving sports in general, but then in like middle school, I started getting interested in football. And at that time, the Seahawks were actually a really good team, and they made it to the Super Bowl, I think in like 2006, with like Matt Hasselbeck, Sean Alexander, Walter Jones. And I really enjoyed watching them, and I've stayed a fan ever since. So I started out kind of as a bandwagon, and then that's essentially the same thing I did with Miami. I really wasn't that interested in basketball. But then when LeBron joined the Heat with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, I was like, all right, I'll join this bandwagon. And then, of course, we went to four straight championships, won two of them. But then after that, after LeBron left and after, Chris Bosh, had a blood clot uh, to deal with, he basically retired. And then Dwayne Wade obviously retired. I'm still a Miami Heat fan. And we made it to the finals a couple years ago with a brand new lineup, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero. Like, I still love them. So that's my two favorite sports is football and basketball. Although probably Stacy will eventually get me into hockey. She loves hockey. Typical Canadian, right? But yeah, football and basketball. I'm on Wizard and Glass and my first read through of The Dark Tower. Nice. Wizard and Glass is very divisive, but hopefully you like it. You either get people who love it or they don't. I would agree, Leslie. Paperbacks are comfy. I much prefer them to hardcovers. What is weird is that I actually really, really liked Rose Matter, but despised Lizzy's story. I mean, I understand. I mean, I definitely like Rose Matter more, much more than Lizzy's story. But for me, it was the same issue. Like Rose Matter, like the first half of it was really good, and then I really liked the main character and her struggle. But then the supernatural, and the other thing is like if you are gonna introduce a supernatural element into an already grounded in reality story, at least make it good. Like in that book, it was so dumb. I didn't like it. Again, floppy paperbacks. Yes, I would agree. Rose Matter might be my next King book. Yes. Yeah, I actually want to go back and reread it, knowing what I already know about it and see if I like it more, but we'll see. The Flop. Yes. We all love The Flop. Yes, I listen to many audiobooks. In fact, the main way that I love to read books is that I will listen to the audiobooks on my headphones and read along with a physical copy. That's like my perfect way to read. But audiobooks are also good for just doing stuff around the house, like chores and like going for a walk, and then commute to and from work is also a good way to do audiobooks. So that's how I get a lot of reading done, is through audiobooks. I love audiobooks. The used bookstore is what determines what king I am going to read next. Yes. I go in and literally whatever they have is what I get, and I am perfectly fine with that. That's exactly what I did when I started reading King. Like I said, Paperbacks Inc., I would go in there, and I think the first time I went, they had like 10 or 15 Stephen King books, and I had a ton of store credit because I just bought or I just gave them a bunch of books. And so I ended up walking out of there with like 10 King books, and just whatever they had, that's what I read. And yeah, I definitely agree with that. I can relate to it. I'm a Packers, Warriors, and Oregon Ducks fan. I can definitely. I'm also an Oakland A's fan, but I don't really like baseball. That's probably my least favorite sport out of all of them is baseball. Not only is it my least favorite to watch, it's also my least favorite to play. I've had very bad experiences trying to play baseball. There was one day in like middle school I tried to play baseball with an old friend of mine, and I was the batter, and he like threw a pitch and it went off the rails and it ended up hitting me in the shoulder. So I was like, fuck this. I'm gonna be the pitcher. And then I pitched and I pitched it very well, but then he hit it. It came right to me, and I and it was coming like right for my groin. And so I like kind of jumped out of the way as quick as I could, and it like nailed me right in the thigh. And it hurt like a son of a bitch. And yeah, I just watching baseball and playing baseball, terrible. And even though I'm not a huge like soccer fan and I'm not a huge hockey fan, I much prefer those to baseball. But yeah, a Packers fan, meh. But Warriors fan, like Golden State Warriors. That's interesting. But one of my best friends is a Warriors fan, and he was very happy about this last finals. Yeah, he's from California. But yeah, I like the Warriors. I love hockey and football. You should watch UFC too. Very entertaining. I'm not a huge fan of fighting and wrestling. I've tried to watch it before, but something about it just seems so depressing. Like just two people just literally going at each other like that, and just you can just get just so injured that way, and just it doesn't appeal to me. No offense, but as a Packers fan, the Seahawks give me PTSD. You know why? I know exactly why. Oh man, that game. I'm assuming you're talking about the NFC Championship game. But yeah, y'all were up by like what was the score? I don't even remember. It was like 16-3 maybe. And like in the fourth quarter, Russell Wilson had a terrible game. He threw like 4 or 5 interceptions. Like we should have for sure lost that game. But somehow we managed to pull it off in overtime. One of the craziest upsets I've ever seen. But yeah, I definitely understand why y'all would hate us. If you love an audiobook, do you ever buy an actual paperback copy as well? I do that frequently. I've done that with a lot of my favorite books. Yeah, you can see like I have a lot of paperbacks. I'll try my best to like get a good deal on them. And for audio, what I do is I usually I have a subscription to Audible, so where I get 24 credits up front for a little more than $200. So that's a little less than $10 per audiobook, which is a really great deal. And then I also have Scribd, which I think is around $10 or $12 a month. And I use that mainly for books that I'm not quite sure about, not sure if I'm going to love, or thrillers. Because usually I don't want to use an Audible credit for a thriller because I'm usually never going to reread it again. So that's kind of the way that I do it. And also, like I said, I love to immersion read, so I try my best to get the audio and the paperback. But if for some reason the paperback is like too expensive or just not available, or if I don't want to risk it, I might just do an audiobook only. And yeah, that's how I do it. Are you going to buy a hardcover copy of Fairy Tale just when it comes out, or wait for the paperback? This is the other thing I wanted to bring up. For my all-time favorite authors, like authors that I'm always excited to get to and that I trust are gonna release good books, I will buy the hardback when it comes out, because, like I said, I like to do immersion reading. So for Fairy Tale, I will buy a hardcover, and then when I'm done with it, I'll probably take it to my local used bookstore and get store credit for it, and then someone else can read it, and then eventually I will buy the paperback copy. Probably not the most it's not good for my budget, but that's how I like to do it anyway. I probably could just get away with doing the audio only, but that's what I like to do. Yes. Oh, for the yeah. I'm sorry. Sorry, not sorry. Yeah, we were up 17-0, and then the third quarter came. Yeah. Definitely one of the crazier upsets. Probably the craziest upset, I guess, would be the Patriots Falcons Super Bowl, 28-3. That was pretty crazy. But yeah. Books that you didn't get or like that you might reread. That's a good question. Uh there's probably some Stephen King books that could apply to this. Like Bag of Bones is an example. That one I read fairly early on in my King reading career, and I really didn't enjoy it, but I might go back and reread it just to see if that was a fluke or a mood thing. So Bag of Bones is an example of that. Other than that, I can't really think of anything, but yeah, Bag of Bones would be one that I don't really remember a lot of it. And then also I'm very curious to see what I would think about it. I think this guy is spamming. How do I get rid of this guy? Okay. I figured it out. Have you read any Michael Crichton? I have indeed read Michael Crichton. That shelf right there is all Michael Crichton. I've read probably about 85% of his books. And even though I've read a lot of them, I wouldn't quite consider him a favorite author just because most of his books usually end up being pretty good, but not all-time favorites. So some of my favorites by him would be Sphere, probably my favorite. Disclosure is very good. Dragon Teeth, which was like unpublished for years and then came out after his death, was very good. And then what other stuff does he have? Prey is very underrated. Next was very good. Jurassic Park. I know people love the book, but I mean, I'm a 90s kid. I grew up watching the movie and I loved dinosaurs. So going back to reading the book as an adult, I didn't love it as much as the movie, but still a good book. And then, yeah, he's got some pretty good books, but even though I've read a lot of his stuff, I wouldn't consider him an all-time favorite author anymore. That's another good Michael Crichton book, Airframe. That was the one where they were trying to figure out like I can't remember the details, but the ending to that book was insane and it was really good. He's just really good at writing techno thrillers. I wonder if that one could ever get an adaptation. Might be a little bit outdated, but yeah, that one is very good. Best book you've read so far this year, that would have to go, and this is discluding or it would be excluding any rereads because I've done a lot of rereading. The best book I've read this year is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. That book just blew me away with how much I loved it. It's just like everything about that book was good. It was perfect, and you rarely get a perfect book. I really wouldn't change anything about it. Yeah, and I did do a book review for it. Yeah, that's probably my favorite. It'll be very hard for any book that I read this year to top it. Some books could include Lisa Jewell's new book because I always love reading Lisa Jewell. Obviously, Stephen King, uh, uh, Sanderson's new book. That's what I was trying to think of. The Lost Metal, maybe. You never know. But yeah, Project Hail Mary, I'm pretty sure it's not locked, but it's pretty firmly secure as like my favorite book this year. Oh, I spell stuff wrong all the time. No worries. The worst book you've read this year. Well, like I said early on in this video, I made a bet with my girlfriend and I lost it and I had to read this really shitty clown erotica book called Floppy Shoes Apocalypse and that was the worst thing I read, but probably one of the most disappointing books was Hyde by Kirsten White. And that was disappointing because me and Stacy went into that book like just thinking like, "Oh, we're going to love this book. The premise sounds really good. It's essentially you put all these people in an amusement park and they have to hide. It's like a deadly game of hide and seek." And we were like, "Oh, this is awesome." But it really wasn't that at all. Like it was marketed as an adult horror, but it read like a young adult mystery romance, and it sucked. It really was not good. I DNF'd it, which was funny too, because like me and Stacy read books to each other, and she was reading that to me, and like we got 80% in, and I was like, "Babe, I can't do it anymore. I don't want to listen to any more of this." And yeah, it was severely disappointing. And then she ended up finishing it because it was a gift from one of our good buddies, Sharon. So she finished the book and yeah, she did not like it. um, that's probably the worst book that's not Floppy Shoes Apocalypse that I've read. Uh, yeah, Blake Crouch. Yeah, techno thrillers. I really enjoyed Dark Matter. Recursion was pretty good. My problem with his books is that his endings always go on a bit too longer than they need to be. Like the ending to I can't remember which one it was, but either Dark Matter or Recursion just went on forever and I'm just like, okay, this is just repeating itself and repeating itself. Like get a move on here. But his premises are always really cool and his ideas are cool, but he never lands the ending for me. Do you e-read at all? Normally I don't, but actually, I just bought. Hold on. I just bought a during Amazon Prime week or whatever. I bought a Amazon Fire because I'm starting to get more advanced reader copies of books. Like I'm very excited for my reader copy of Mothered by Zoe Stage, who is one of my all-time favorite authors. And that's the only way I can really read it is an e-copy. So I was like, "Oh, this was like half off." So I was like, "Oh, 40 bucks, why not?" And so I might start doing a bit more, but I prefer just paperbacks, but you never know. We'll see. Ugh, excuse me. What are some of your favorite drummers? Minus Ringo Starr. Ringo Starr, he's underrated and he gets a lot of shit just cuz like I don't know, but And funny enough, like Paul McCartney was asked like if Ringo was the best drummer, like at the time, and he was like, he's not even the best drummer in the Beatles. But yeah, I think he's underrated. Like the Beatles would not be the same without Ringo. But yeah, I've already earlier on in the live show I talked about some of my favorites, but John Bonham from Led Zeppelin, Steve Gadd, Mike Portnoy, Annika Neelis, Mitch Mitchell from Jimi Hendrix. Uh, who else? Ray Hearn from one of my new favorite bands, Haken. They're really good. Uh, why am I blanking on drummers now? I don't know, but that's like those are some of my favorites. I have too many to count though. Hey, Kevy. Nice to have you here. Recursion is my least favorite. Yeah, it definitely dragged. Yeah, if that's the one that I'm remembering correctly, that's the one that dragged. Yeah, I would agree. My oldest book, like the oldest book, like publication, like the oldest book that I've read. Uh, I don't. That's another thing. I don't read too many classics. I've read some of my favorite books are classics though. Like Picture of Dorian Gray was really good. That's my favorite, but I think that one's from like 1890s. So it's probably not the oldest. Frankenstein is very old. That's like from the 1820s. I really liked that one. Uh, when was Scarlet Letter written? I don't know. I'll go with Frankenstein. That's probably the oldest book that I've read, besides like Shakespeare when I was forced to read that in uh, high school, or even the Odyssey when we were forced to read segments of that in high school. But if we're talking about a novel, probably Frankenstein. I agree with you when you say you prefer King shorter books. That being said, I've read about 300 pages into it a couple of times. Does it get better? Um, I guess it depends on what you mean by better. Uh, I mean, it pretty much reads the same way like that throughout the whole book. So it was pretty consistent of like, okay, the book is really good and the characters are really good, but a lot of these scenes just drag on and they really should have been edited down. That was my main complaint. My main complaint isn't really with the story. It's just that the editor, whoever edited the book, didn't really they didn't really edit it down very much because it's 1100 pages when really it could have been a really strong 800-page book. But yeah, I wouldn't say it gets better. I would just say it stays the same throughout. But yeah, I would definitely give it another shot. Go and read the whole thing. But yeah, I would argue that King writes better shorter fiction and better novellas in my mind. Who really is the best drummer on the Beatles? Uh, I'll go with George. But no, Ringo. Oh man, yeah, justice for Ringo. Okay, he he really was like a huge inspiration for so many drummers, and his playing style just. And that's the other thing. Like with drummers, like a lot of people nowadays just if you can like have sick chops and if you can like do a really cool solo or do like stick tricks or whatever, you get a lot of praise for it. But really, the ultimate goal for a drummer is to be the backbone in the heart of the band. And Ringo did that perfectly. And he fit he played what was necessary for the songs and didn't do anything extraneous. Which you listen to a lot of drummers now and they're just doing like all kinds of shit to like try to stand out. But Ringo, he was just on time. He didn't do anything too crazy, and he just played to the song, which is exactly what you need to do. And he has a lot of cool, really interesting drum beats. Come Together, one of the coolest drum beats of all time. Rain, go listen to that. It's really good. So many great drum moments. And yeah, that's a little bit of justice for Ringo. Oh man, favorite Zeppelin song. I think right now, like the past few years, I've been saying The Ocean. That's probably my favorite. Uh, but yeah, that one's really cool. Very interesting time signature, and the live version is one of my favorite drum songs to listen to. One of my favorite guitar licks. So yeah, if I had to pick one, I would pick The Ocean. No, oldest book edition in your collection. Oh, okay. So like literally the oldest book. Um Probably I have a lot of really old Agatha Christie books, and I think some of them are from like the 50s and 60s. So probably one of those, I would guess. But I really don't have a lot of old books. So I'll probably go with a random Agatha Christie book for that answer. The thing about Paul McCartney saying Ringo's not the best drummer in the Beatles is a myth, although it's a very popular myth. And I know that not too long ago. I thought there was a video clip of him saying that. I could have swore about. Maybe it's one of those whatchamacallit. I can't remember what it's called, but like something that's in the ether that everyone thinks they remember, but they actually don't. What is that called? I don't know. But yeah, I could have swore he actually said that, but maybe I'm wrong. I'm reading Different Seasons right now, my first novella collection by King. Well, that's his best one, in my opinion. I hope you have a good time with it. That's one of my all-time favorite King books. Hey, Patrick. Uh, excuse me. That's what you meant. Okay. I am indeed a drummer. Welcome, Patrick. What is your least favorite Zeppelin song? Okay. They don't have a lot of bad songs. And I would argue they don't have bad songs. They just have songs that are just subpar for them. Probably my least favorite song that they've ever done is off of In Through the Outdoor, and it's called uh, Carouselambra. It's like a 10.5 minute song. And for the first like 3 to 4 minutes of the song, it's just got like a keyboard riff that just plays over and over again. And that song literally gives me a headache. Not a bad song, but just I can't really listen to it that often. The riff is like just over and over again. So that's probably my least favorite. Yeah, like I said, they don't have a lot of bad songs or really any bad songs. Even though Ringo is the backbone of the band, they would always shove him into the back of music videos. They would do that. Oh man, so much Ringo hate. Yeah, Ringo, he's a great drummer. Were you a fan of R.L. Stine? I was. I did read a few Goosebumps books when I was younger, and I actually watched. I'll have to go back and like rewatch them, but I watched a few like Goosebumps episodes. I'm sure they don't hold up today, but I liked watching those when I was very young. I can't necessarily remember any specific R.L. Stine books. But yeah, I did read a lot of him when I was younger. Besides King, do you have any other go-to horror authors? Personally, I love Algernon Blackwood. Okay, I'm gonna write that name down. But yes, I do have some go-to horror authors. Some of my favorites would include Stephen Graham Jones, who is actually now in my top 10 favorite authors list. He's really good horror writer. Zoe Stage, I'll read anything she writes. Caroline Kepnes, who writes the Joe Goldberg series. I love her. Anybody else? Dan Wells writes the John Cleaver series, which is one of my favorite horror series. Brahm, who wrote Krampus and the Child Thief. Those two books are really good. So those are probably some of my other favorite horror authors, besides Stephen King, of course. Oh, okay, you fixed your question. Were you a fan of R.L. Stine? I was when I was younger. Oh yeah, actually, I did read in middle school. I read one of his books. I have it. Uh, what's it called? Oh yeah, it's called The Overnight. I read that in middle school, and that's actually one of his. I think it's more of a young adult horror book. It was pretty good, and actually, that book, I think it was supposed to have inspired "I Know What You Did Last Summer." Because, like I said, I love watching horror movies when I was younger, and reading that book, I was like, "This is very, very similar to I Know What You Did Last Summer." So, probably whoever made that movie got a lot of inspiration or just straight up plagiarized that book. But yeah, again, I did read some R.L. Stine. Blackwood's best are The Willows, The Wendigo, and The Empty House. Again, I will write all these down because I want some good recommendations here. Willows, Wendigo, Empty House. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Dylan. Have you read any Clive Barker books? I've only read The Hellbound Heart, which was the novella that got turned into Hellraiser. That one was fine, but I did prefer the movie. I haven't really read. I think that's the only Clive Barker I've read. Yeah, I've heard mixed things about him. I know a lot of horror fans love him, but at the same time, he's supposed to be really weird and has supposed and it and it's supposed to have a lot of weird sex stuff in his books. So I don't know how interested I am in reading that. But yeah, I might give him a shot one of these days. I know he's really big in horror, but yeah, we'll see. Longest bull you've ever read. I'm assuming that's a typo. Longest book you've ever read. That would probably go to Rhythm of War. That audiobook I think was like 57, 58 hours long. So that one was pretty long. And then also The Stand and Itch are also very long. Um Storm of Swords, Dance with Dragons. But yeah, I would probably go with the Stormlight Archive books. Those are just massive books. Any plans to get authors on for interviews? Oh, I don't think I would handle I think I'd be too nervous to do that. Yeah, I'll let other people do that. I don't think that's for me. I would be a nervous wreck. I mean, even doing this by myself in front of nobody is well, not nobody because y'all are watching, but like not interacting with somebody else. Even this is nerve wracking for me. I can't imagine like and then also even doing it with friends. Like I've done live shows before, but I was extremely nervous. Doing it with an author that I admire their works from would just be very nerve-wracking. I don't think I'd be able to do it. Maybe one day, but I don't know. We'll see. Full Dark No Stars is awesome. That is one of his novella collections. Well, three novellas and one short story. They're all very dark and I love it. I would definitely put that in my top 20 Stephen King books of all time. Let's see, you got 1922, which is probably my favorite in there. Big Driver, which is great, but because of the subject matter, it's hard to read at times. Fair Extension is a really good and fun short story, one of my favorite King short stories. And then Good Marriage, very solid novella. So overall, one of my favorites. I definitely recommend it. I would recommend John Ajvid Lingvist. He wrote the book. I have heard of that. Uh, that got turned into a movie, which I really want to watch too. So yes, I've heard great things about the book and the movie. If you've read the movie, let me know what you think of it and how it compares to the book. But yeah, that's definitely something I'm interested in trying out. Oh, Algernon Blackwood is a classic author. Okay. Oh, like classic, like he's been published way back when. Either way, I'm interested in trying it out. Actually, you know what? I think now that you mention it, one of the stories was Wendigo, and I think that inspired the movie Antlers. I've heard the short story is much better than the movie, so I am now fairly interested in reading that. What is your top Dean Koontz book? Like I said, back in college, I started reading a lot of Stephen King books, but also on top of that, I was reading a lot of Dean Koontz books because, like, I'd go to Paperbacks Inc. and there would just be a ton of Stephen King and a ton of Dean Koontz, like right in the same section. And both of their last names start with K, so they were like King Koontz. So I've read a lot of Dean Koontz. I'm not a huge fan of him anymore. I've tried to read some of his books, and his writing style just doesn't really work for me anymore. But back then, I loved his writing style. But I have read a few of his books that I would say still hold up. Like Phantoms, I would say that book holds up well. And I read that a few years ago. I would say that one's really good. Strangers or The Strangers is very good. Um, Odd Thomas is really good. The Bad Place. If I had to pick a favorite, though, I guess I would go with Phantoms. That one has a really shitty movie adaptation. Uh, but yeah, I would say Phantoms is a good place for starting with Dean Koontz. Really good. Have they released Dark Tower in mass market paperback? Uh, I don't know actually. I have the box set, which right here. I had the box set of Dark Tower, but I don't know if they've released it in mass market. I mean, if they did, I'd probably get it because I would prefer that. Thanks, Ellen. Uh, yes, thank you so much because that's my favorite book. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I love paperbacks either way, but I do actually prefer mass market if I can get my hands on it. I love the original. Uh, oh, is this about? Um, okay. I love the original version from 2008. It was close to the book for the most part. However, they made some creative liberties, but it didn't harm the story. The 2010 American remake was decent. Okay. So yeah, I really want to go check that out. So thanks for mentioning that. All right, thanks, Fionn. Thank you. Have fun. All right. Thank you, Patrick. Do you have a favorite guitar player? Uh I mean, again, Led Zeppelin's my favorite, so my go-to answer would be Jimmy Page. But obviously, I love Jimi Hendrix. I love David Gilmour. I love John Petrucci from Dream Theater. I got to see Dream Theater live this year for the first time, and he was incredible. Uh, yeah, I guess I would say John Petrucci is now my favorite. Seeing him live and just, yeah, I would go with John Petrucci. In fact, a lot of my favorite guitar players start with J, like Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, John Petrucci. Uh, yeah, and then throw in David Gilmour, Slash. Yeah, those are some of my favorites. Have you read Peter Straub minus his collaborations with King? No, and I'm kind of afraid to because like The Talisman was just shit, and then Black House I've tried to read, and it might not be fair because like obviously I love Stephen King without Peter Straub. Maybe I would love Peter Straub without Stephen King. Maybe just them meshing does not work well for me. I haven't tried to read his other stuff. I think Ghost Story is supposed to be very good. Um I think there's a book called The Throat or something. But yeah, I haven't tried to read his stuff. So if you have any recommendations, let me know because I haven't tried any of his stuff. All right. Well, we're hitting close to 2 hours here, folks. So I'll probably be signing off here soon. If there's any last minute questions y'all want me to answer, I'll go ahead and answer them. But I think 2 hours is long enough for me. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining the live show. And thank you guys for just continuing to support me and the channel and the Discord server. Thank you guys so much. I'll wait a little bit just to see if there's any last minute questions. I don't know about y'all, but I get so like, if I talk a lot, my mouth gets very dry, my lips get very chapped, and just have to drink a ton of water. So, get some chapstick. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Again, thank you guys so much for joining me and continuing to support the channel. Thank you. And yeah, I'm very excited to hit 1K. I think I will now. I think I'm less anxious about doing live streams, especially just doing them by myself. This is much more comfortable for me. So yeah, I think I will be doing more live streams. So yeah, it's been fun chatting. Thank you. Also, Ghost Story, but okay. So I'll write down Ghost Story. But yeah. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me today. Have a great rest of your day, and yeah, thank you guys so much. Bye bye.